to me, one of the most important things about doing ancient history, I'll say, is to learn how incredibly different people could be in antiquity. To learn the ideas, modern ideas about whether it's sexuality or race or gender, all sorts of things. We might think there are a lot of different options on the table right now, but then you find out people think about it completely differently 2,000 years ago. And they think about it completely differently in Greece to the way they think about it in Mesopotamia or anywhere else. And I think there's a really, for me, the biggest thing that I got from learning about the ancient world as a student was realizing that there's no such thing as human nature, that humans can be wildly different and see the world in incredibly different ways. And I think that was immensely liberating to me as a student. And I love it when I can see my own students being liberated by that kind of realization that it's not that you just have, it's not just that you have to decide between the options that are currently on the table. It's that you can imagine totally different options and think completely differently about the world. And that to me is the biggest reason of all to study places that are very distant. And one of the most distant things you can get is the past, the distant past.
It sounds a really similar argument that's made for science fiction, right? So Kim Stanley Robinson, I believe, did a PhD in California under Frederick Jameson. Mm-hmm. And he makes this argument about science fiction being this incredibly useful genre because it opens up a set of political possibilities. Yep. How we recognize the moment we're all in is historically contingent. There's no essential human nature. You're making the same argument for the classics, fundamentally. It opens up the sort of horizon of possibility for human affairs.
I think I am making the same argument, but I think it's really important that these things really happened.
Yeah.
That some of the possibilities, you can say, real people really had those ideas, really saw the world that way. And it's not just that I can imagine this being the case, but that some people found that obvious. One really obvious example would be political regimes. I mean, it often seems now like you just have to agree that democracy is the only acceptable political regime, and that every other way of organizing human communities is obviously inferior to that. But actually, democracy is really unusual historically. Whether we think it's good or bad or whatever, or that maybe somebody should try it sometime, it's really historically very rare. But there are all sorts of other alternatives that people try, and some of them, are awful. Tyranny, kings, things usually go wrong there. But there are all sorts of ways of organizing communities in ways that are equal, level, voluntary, more voluntary than many democracies, that actually turn out to be much more common in human history than democracy. So to me, I think knowing more about those sorts of histories, those sorts of communities, opens up possibilities for where are we going to go from here, because we can't stay where we are.
Yeah. The classics argument against capitalist realism. Right?
Yes, exactly.
We've got Mark Fisher, Joe Quinn, Frederick Jameson. That makes sense. No, that does make sense to me. And some of the work as well of David Wangro and the late David Graeber about radical archaeology and the idea that there was a Paris commune in Mesoamerica that's completely undocumented 1,500 years ago is kind of mind-blowing. But it puts things in context.
Yeah, and I think they've done amazing work at sort of showing a real range of possibilities, even going back into very deep time in some cases. But still, these are humans. These are humans who had to face the same problem of how do you organize groups larger than immediate families, neighbours, and so on. And they found all sorts of really imaginative solutions to that. And I guess I would like to see a bit more imagination in politics. And part of freeing people up to do that is taking away the assumptions about what must be right.